Hello. This is going to be my first attempt at a movie rant. It's involving the Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Episode 8. This will be loaded with spoilers. If you don't want things ruined for you, stop watching. You may be wondering why I have these action figures up front. They're decorative, obviously, and I'm not comfortable with putting my face out there just yet. Maybe someday. And I understand that might be boring, but alright, maybe someday. Anyway, so I had to get this review out there because it's just like a therapeutic thing. Plus, if I talk to anybody in the real world, then I can just forward them to this link, and I won't have to go on for who knows how long ranting about this movie. I will say that I went into this movie, I stayed up, I work nights, so I stayed up till 10 in the morning to go see it. I wanted this movie to be good. I was disappointed with Episode 7 due to the recycled nature of it. I mean, I can't enjoy that movie because every time I watch it, I keep thinking of all the scenes that had happened in Episode 4. But anyway, I went into this one hoping after Rogue One was so awesome, I was like, maybe Disney's got it on track now, and I heard there were rewrites to make it less like the originals for this one. And I think there's evidence of that in this movie, by the way. So I go into this movie, and there's all these things that happen throughout it, and like, I mean, the first thing for me that was really bad, like a lot of people were complaining about Rey hands Luke this lightsaber that we waited 2 years for her to hand off, and he throws it behind himself like it's garbage. He doesn't care about it. That scene didn't bother me too much because I really had been hoping he was pulling a Yoda, where, you know, Yoda acts like he's some dumb little creature when Luke first meets him, and then you find out he's the wise Jedi Master, the great warrior. I was hoping Luke just was tossing aside like it didn't matter in a way to like get Rey to prove herself later, or like he could trick her, sort of like Yoda had with him. But no, the message was he's just that disillusioned with everything. He doesn't care, even though, I mean, I gotta think anybody would be like, how did this lightsaber come back after I lost my hand and it fell down this and all that stuff. But that's not that big an issue for me. For me, the big shot across the bow was when Poe is making the your mama jokes with Hux and Hugs jokes with Hux, because this was like my first we're in trouble here. These kind of jokes come out throughout the movie. I'm alright, like, people hit the nail on the head in other reviews. These are like Michael Bay jokes from Transformers, which I like Transformers for the most part. But I also go in there with, like, I lower the bar for them, which is, it's going to be a shame if that's what I have to learn to do with these Star Wars movies, where they aren't what they used to be. They're now Michael Bay-esque level. Nothing against him. And I actually like the latest Transformers, but that fourth one was a doozy. Anyway, so yeah, we got the Hugs jokes, and then Hux, who's supposed to be this formidable guy that rose up into the ranks of the First Order, which is not supposed to be easy, but then he is reduced to like a 5-year-old hissy fit in front of his crew when he gets called Hugs. When these guys would just be like, alright, this pilot is a fool. Like, you know, he's making infantile jokes, but instead it actually gets through and bothers him. That was my first issue. And then it's like we've got this, you know, gratuitous X-Wing, single X-Wings taking on the Star Destroyer or whatever it is, almost all by itself. And it's, I get after you've seen this movie, you figure out what happened here. It's like, hey, we're not going to have any real space battles in this movie, so we got to have an X-Wing flying around. And it's also like Poe's moment to shine, because he goes nothing but downhill after that. I don't know, it was okay. It's just kind of like, I mean, I kind of had trouble believing this evil First Order wouldn't just blast that X-Wing when it was stationary like it was. Then the next issue is that we have these bombers show up to try to take out this Dreadnought. Now, the Dreadnought's a really cool ship. It made me think of the novels that have been thrown out the door. I don't know if it's supposed to be very similar to the Dreadnoughts that they talk about. And I think it's the second book of the Thrawn trilogy. But those, I don't know, that was kind of cool. But Poe gets into this whole classic, usual Star Wars thing, like we'll never get another shot at this, we got to take this out, and then lose all the ships. That becomes his character arc, as he's got to learn, like Captain Kirk did in Star Trek Into Darkness, about the value of his lives, and you can't risk everything all the time, like the people under him. Kind of like that Star Trek Into Darkness came out only like a few years ago, maybe 2012 or something, so I just saw that idea. I really didn't need to see it again, but I get it. They're trying to make him into a character. So these bombers really annoyed me because I don't know how many you had, maybe 8 or 12 or something, and all but one of them get taken out within like the first 3 seconds of them showing up. But somehow this one bomber gets through all these defenses, and it's like everybody sees it. It's the worst paced out suspense action scene I think I've ever seen in a movie. Like, they could have fixed this. Like, this thing gets through. I don't even know if it had a conscious pilot at the time, because I thought everybody except that Rose's sister got knocked out or killed. People have told me there was a pilot awake. Regardless, it's like this thing was not at 100% yet. It's getting through all these defenses. Meanwhile, the other bombers got wiped out all at once. You could have saved this scene by having it more like the end of A New Hope, where the X-Wings gradually get taken out, and that one gets through at the very end. And then, even then, it could have been a little bit like Empire Strikes Back with Dak and the Snowspeeder, where even Luke's co-pilot gets taken out. But instead, it just, from what I remember, it was like all the bombers got taken out at once except one, and then that thing, it took, I don't know how many minutes or whatever, but it kept getting through, and no one was messing it up somehow. And even like the moments of like finally dropping the bombs, which people complain about gravity and stuff, I mean, I can get around that. Maybe there was magnetism involved, I don't know. But, and there's also like, why didn't the air get pressurizing issues with opening the doors in space? Maybe it was like just not really CGI'd up, but maybe they had those barriers like you see in the Clone War era. So yeah, then it's just like the pacing was so slow and drawn out, and like these people like Rose's sister that we have no attachment to should matter, but they don't matter. Like, I don't know, it just was rough. Then I'm not even sure what to talk about next. I think the big issue for me was they moved on to, well, yeah, you got Luke and Rey on their island, and there's all these really childish moments with Luke and the wildlife and stuff. I get what they were going with. Like, some people were like, why are they emphasizing the food aspect? That hasn't been done in Star Wars, one person said. Well, it had been done in Empire Strikes Back. Like, Yoda had been working on that stew, and I think what they're going with this would, like, much like Yoda, Luke's living off the land. Like, I don't know what Yoda was hunting in those swamps, but you can bet that was some wild stuff. But we get to see that Luke's got his dairy situation, and he's a good fisherman. Whatever, yeah, like, I mean, they did overdo it, but I see what they were doing. I just don't understand why, like one of my friends pointed out, like, Luke gets this milk from the teat of this one monster, and he has to look at Rey in this really creepy way. Like, it's just really a weird choice. But anyway, that's going on. Then the next big issue for me was back in Leia's fleet. First of all, I've been meaning to say I sympathize with the director / writers of this movie, because they were, I guess, told to start off literally right where episode 7 ended, which doesn't give you, I mean, it kind of limits what you're going to do, in my opinion, because the older movies had a span of I don't know how many months or maybe even years where you could just jump into things. Like after Empire Strikes Back, you jump into Return of the Jedi, and you don't know how much time's gone by, but Luke has definitely learned some more things since you last saw him. After A New Hope and then Empire Strikes Back, you know, Han's risen in the ranks, and, you know, so has Luke. And Vader's learned more about Luke's existence and is hunting him down. So you could, like, explain that as we're going. In this, it's like, we already know. I mean, you think about it, the crawl isn't necessarily needed in this movie. It's just, hey, we pick up where we last left off. But anyway, what they do establish in that crawl and in the previous movie is that somewhere in all these, since Rey was created or born or whatever, the rebellion became a republic, I'd assume, and then somehow the First Order showed up and unseated them. But we just have to take their word for how that all happened, or maybe the books are coming out if they aren't already out, but I don't think they are. Anyway, so it's beaten over our head that the First Order virtually runs the entire galaxy already. That means there's ships all over the place for them to be able to say that. But I get the impression that what we see chasing Leia's fleet is pretty much the Resistance, even though if it's as big as it should be, there's a lot more ships out there than that. We're also beaten into our head that what we see with Leia's group is all that there is of the Resistance, which makes it kind of ridiculous. I know the point of this whole movie is to get more people to jump on board, but when the Resistance is this small, outmanned, and outgunned, there's a part of me that thinks maybe it's not supposed to win. Anyway, we've got this situation where Leia's ship, they're somehow being tracked, and I couldn't remember if it's one ship's being tracked through hyperspace because there's a device on it being tracked, which, I mean, we're going to assume if that's the case, it's Leia's ship, or is it the entire, if each ship in the fleet can be tracked without a device on it. I really hope it was just a device that was on the ships, because otherwise now you're making it so people can't jump out of hyperspace and get away anymore. But we're in this weird scenario where, and it's so contrived because there's so many things that the only thing that makes sense is to say, hey, this is what the writer wanted and roll with it. But I can't. This moment, and I made a small video about it with Legos. This moment with, I call it the space chase, killed the entire movie for me because it just didn't seem to flow right. As other people have described for like when they have an issue with a movie, it took me out of the movie. I'm too busy sitting there thinking this doesn't make sense. The scenario is this. The rebels, I'm going to call them the rebels instead of resistance because that's what they are. I'm going to probably call the First Order the Empire because that's what they are. New names do not change what they are. Anyway, so the rebels have figured out that if they jump into hyperspace, they'll use up more of their fuel, and the First Order will be able to follow them no matter what. So the only thing they can do is go at like their maximum sublight, or if it were Star Trek, it'd be like impulse power. And then by doing this, they will stay just out of the range of the First Order, and they have no choice but to keep doing this until they run out of fuel. And for such and such reason, the TIE fighters and other light crafts cannot reach them as well, which doesn't make sense because, like, if you made this like real life, these capital ships are kind of like our aircraft carriers and things like that, and these TIE fighters would be like your fighter planes. It's ridiculous to think these TIE fighters cannot reach these capital ships. But anyway, that's what the writer wanted. And they explain, the rebels are running low on fuel and they can't jump. But what they don't explain is why can't the First Order, I think somebody came up, I don't know if they said this in the movie and I just forgot, but there's supposedly a flimsy argument that the First Order ships can't jump into hyperspace and reach them on the other side because it's too far, it's like overkill for, but I don't buy that. And I really don't think that, like, all the ships that would be in the galaxy for the First Order to be controlling the galaxy, they could call some ships somewhere. I've been told there was like an 18-hour window in this whole chase. They could have figured out some calculations on which ships were in the area and had them make a space roadblock that would intercept Leia's fleet. I personally think, and they could have done this. Like, this would have been a better thing. Like, Poe has this mutiny, which I'll talk about later. All that could have been thrown out the door, and you could have had these, like, ships intercept, like, these light cruisers that could have put up a decent fight, but maybe weren't as heavily armed as Leia's ships. And you could have had, like, a little cutting back and forth. Like, oh, now they're dealing with these ships that are in their way. But anyway, I guess we wanted this really agonizingly so drawn out chase where the rebels can't fight back really. So anyway, this seems so dumb to me, and it seems so, this is what the writer wanted, so he forced the way to make it happen, that I can't buy it. And if you take out the scene, And then all of the movie falls apart from there because Poe wouldn't have had these mutiny scenes because the ships would have been caught sooner and blown up. Finn and his mission, which didn't matter anyway, wouldn't have happened because he wouldn't have been able to get back in time. That's the thing that bothers me. Finn's mission, like I said, they were told that there's an 18-hour window. He gets into the ship with Rose, and somehow this one ship was saved in the destruction. It can jump out into wherever this Canto Bight planet is, the casino planet. He can get there, get on the planet, find this guy, this code breaker, and then his next plan is to jump into hyperspace and get to the First Order ship. Get on board that and then turn off the signal. It just seems like that's very implausible in an 18-hour window. This hyperspace isn't like Battlestar Galactica where you have the faster than light travel that's instantaneous. It takes a while depending on where your location is. And if he's got the time to jump from that place to wherever Canto Bight is and do all this and jump back, then I feel like the First Order can definitely get some ships to intercept Leia in that same amount of time. You got on the casino planet, it's really boring in my opinion. That planet is easily the lamest planet in the Star Wars history from what I can recall ever seeing. Revenge of the Sith is loaded with awesome planets that you only get to see for a couple seconds, and each one of them is better than this Canto thing. Let's see, then you got, I don't know, this is when I got up and used the bathroom wisely because I could see this gambling planet was not going to be cool. But apparently they meet these kids and they're code breakers in jail. He's been waiting basically for some moment like this, and once he realizes it's worth his time, he reveals he can just break them all out because he's had the keys the whole time. They free these horse dog alien things that are forced to race. I really didn't take much from this scene other than it was alright, Finn needs something to do while the chase is going on and Rey is learning from Luke. But yeah, then I guess I'll wrap Finn's story up here. He does get to that First Order ship. He finally confronts Phasma, and this was something I thought was going to be really cool, but it was almost like they're look, we got to put Phasma in here just to kill her off. And I can't remember if she's definitely dead or if she could come back, but I think everyone assumes she's dead. And with the level of attention given to her at this point, it's well, if we see her come back in the third one, why do we care? Because she keeps getting messed over. Like she's nothing. And a lot of people complain about the feminism in this movie, and I have issues with it too. But it baffles me that if this was the agenda, why does the Phasma character get such little screen time unless it's look, we don't want any women portrayed as villains. Just because she's this badass trooper doesn't make her a non-awesome you could have made this an awesome female character. She could have been taking out dudes left and right, and she's got the cred behind her. Instead, it was a missed opportunity, and the only reason I can come up with is they didn't want to vilify a woman. Which, men and women, we are all good and bad. Some are awesome, some aren't. On both sides. I don't know why we have to have it all. Women are nothing but awesome, amazing, gifted people, and never do anything wrong, which this movie seems to suggest. Anyway, I'll get into that more. So then, eventually Finn and Rose get to the salt planet, and I don't know, there's a lot of inconsistencies going on here. They get on these junky little ski speeders, which, happen to look like B-wings and sound a lot like snow speeders, but they're their own new thing. They aren't recycled like everything else in this movie. Anyway, even the gambling planet, that's a little bit of, you got some Lando there. The hacker is very much like Lando. He betrays them, although he doesn't come back on their side, I don't think. I didn't care. I've talked to people, they assumed that was going to be Lando, but no. I think I heard that Billy D. Williams was definitely not going to be in this movie. But anyway, If Rose gives some cheesy line after she botches Finn's attempt to sacrifice himself like a hero. Didn't really care either way. Some people get more upset about it than others. I see it for what it is. It's just a forced... Finn got Luke Skywalker in this because he was after Rey, much like Luke was after Leia. And in this one, Kylo, a.k.a. Han Solo, showed up, and now Rey's interested in him. And now Finn has been kicked to the curb. But at least he's got somebody that likes him. Luke didn't even have that, but I guess that was the Force. Anyway, that's pretty much all I'm going to say about Finn and Rose. Next, I'm going to get back to Rey. We've got... What bothers me about this is she's on there training with Luke, and like a lot of people have said, like, she doesn't really even learn anything from Luke. And I agree. But I'm not going to get into that. What I'm going to get into, and I don't think I've seen anybody else talk about it, is like she gets these like visions from Kylo, and she decides she's going to go hang out with him, even though Luke's like, hey, that's not a good idea. But much like when Luke decided he had to confront Vader, he didn't listen to Yoda, so she doesn't listen to Luke. What drives me nuts about this is there is like some coffin-shaped ship of some sort with hyperdrive on Luke's island. Which, oh yeah, let me get to that also. I forgot about that. Luke doesn't want anything to do with the rest of the universe or the galaxy, whatever. He's on this island. He doesn't want people to come find him. But why is there a map on how to get to him? Like, what was the story behind that? Because for all we can tell, Luke does not want any involvement. But somewhere he sent out a map on how to get to him. Like, why would he do that? That didn't make sense to me at all. But anyway, yeah. Not only that, he's sunk his X-Wing, which was kind of nice to see, but he's apparently got some like little coffin-shaped craft on the island, unless that was in the Falcon. I don't know if that's like in a cut scene. That's another thing. People defend this movie because it's got all this cut footage. I'm sorry. I cannot like a movie when your defense is... I think it's already bad, and your defense is, hey, but it's got all this cut footage that will make it good. It's like, then it's not good. It's not a finished... Like, if this was like a high school AP paper or a college paper, then you're like telling me, hey, this paper would have been good if I had the time to work on some more stuff, but I didn't get around to it. No. It doesn't work like that. Anyway, so somewhere there's this coffin-shaped hyperdrive ship on this island, and Rey's able to use it to conveniently get to Kylo like that. And this coffin-shaped ship, I mean, it may as well be called the writer's ship. Like, it's just like, hey, we need a way for Rey to get to Kylo. Like, they didn't want to send the Falcon out, because I guess then Chewbacca and BB-8, or I don't know if BB-8 was with him. I think he was, but I don't even remember where he was at this point. Anyway, but Chewbacca and the Falcon would have been there, and then it would have been complicated for how they got out, even though people have pointed out there's, like, cut scenes that don't make, like, apparently explain how Chewie and the Falcon get to that salt planet. But it's so, it's such a mess, and that's how I label this movie overall. But this coffin ship, one of the biggest conveniences ever in this movie, of conveniences, shows up. And that's where we get this Kylo Ren Snoke scene that was pretty cool for, like, just because, like, the shock value of it is cool. But I don't think it's going to live up in history, like, in repeat viewings. There's a lot of gratuitous, these Red Royal Guard type guys that almost each of them has, like, their own signature weapon. I mean, it's going to sell some toys. In fact, in my personal opinion, it's like the only action figure to actually want from this set. From this series are the red guys, and I don't even give them credit for this scene, because really what they did was, fans since 1983's Return of the Jedi have wanted to see those Royal Guards fight, and what can they do? Why are they there? Why are they that important that they can be there close by the Emperor? And then in Revenge of the Sith we got to see them for a little bit, and only enough for us to see Yoda knock them out against a wall, but we thought that was going to be our chance to see what they're made of. So we finally do get to see what those kind of guys are capable of in this movie. So I give them credit for that, but at the same time I don't, because it's really just following up on a fan-demanded wish or hope that's been going on for almost 40 years. Good job. You got something small. It's like, that's the kind of thing that gives you little points on your paper. if you're being graded, but it's not enough to save it. And so then this brings me to, at some point, a big thing about this movie is Rey still trying to figure out her lineage, or who her parents are. And it fascinates me because we all assume she's nobody. And Kylo, it's all because Kylo tells her in the big "I'm your father" moment, where he's like, "Oh, you really don't remember who your parents were, do you?" And she's like, "No, I don't." And he's like, "Oh, they were nothing." I mean, was I one of the only people that thought, like, when he said, "You really don't remember who your parents were," that he was like really saying, "So I could tell you anything and you'd believe it"? And then she's like, "Well, yeah, I don't, and AKA I'll believe anything you tell me." So he's like, "They were nothing," and she buys it. And it's kind of like, it's even in his tone when he says, "So you really don't remember." I think he's lying to her. And so one of the big things that people either bash this movie or praise it for is her parents being nobody. I think it's an interesting idea. I don't think it's very satisfying, and I don't think it's going to be the case. I predict that in Episode 9, we will learn that Kylo is her brother and that Luke and Leia are her parents. I think this movie, one of the big goals was to throw us off the scent with this, that she's nobody. It just would make a whole lot more sense if she's a solo, because then we learn that Snoke wasn't the one bridging them together and their Force visions. They're more like Luke and Leia. It's also going to be more like Luke and Leia because we're going to learn that Kylo cannot be this love interest that a lot of people are thinking. I mean, I guess he could be Game of Thrones style, but it's not likely to happen. And then it'd be interesting because if she doesn't go for the Force as her other person, like her attraction, then maybe Finn's got a shot still. Probably not, though. And I've also done some looking into Episode 7, like, because there's a lot of things that seem convenient in that at first, like the Millennium Falcon happens to be there, and you got these Resistance base people in the village that happen to be there. But after comparing it to Episode 4, and I realize I might be going off track here, but like I said, this is a jumbled mess here myself with this review. But anyway, if you look at Episode 7, you got that village with that guy, Lor Sateka, or whatever his name is, the old man that gets killed by Kylo Ren in the very beginning. Well, if you look at that, like, apparently in the novel, they explain that village where he is where she learns about Han Solo and the Jedi and everything. Well, they're very similar to in Episode 4, where Obi-Wan is watching over Luke. Because after watching the prequels, you can piece it together. Like, R2 and C-3PO get shot out in that escape pod in the original A New Hope. Well, they land, like, after the prequels, we know that R2 knows where Tatooine is. He's been there twice, or he's been there at least a couple times. And the only places he knows are Mos Espa, where little Anakin was in the pod races, and Mos Eisley, where he knows that the Lars farm is. Now, I don't know how good a escape pod is at aiming for where it's going to land, but he probably ballparked it as best he could, and then he and C-3PO were out there walking in the desert, and his plan was probably to get to the Lars family because he knew that Obi-Wan was in that area roughly. Now, you don't know that stuff unless you see the prequels. Otherwise, it's like, what are the odds of that escape pod landing on a planet that in some proximity to Obi-Wan, when you consider, like, it could have, if it was Earth and Obi-Wan was in England, what if it could have landed all sorts of places, not to mention the ocean, although that's not necessarily an issue on Tatooine. But then it's very similar to this, I think. I think that Leia's people know that Rey's on that planet, and that they have that lore guy watching over her. And if he's watching over her, then her parents are not nobody. A lot of people would say, well, it's the Force. It's just fate that she was there. I'm not buying that. And a lot of people are going to say in Episode 9, when we find out that Kylo is her brother, oh my God, Abrams saved it. No, I'm telling you, they've known. They've known it since Episode 7. Episode 8 was just to throw us off the scent. Personally, I would like to find out that Kylo was the one that dropped her off on that planet. And they'd have to finagle with that. But I think that's like his first redeeming quality. I've also wondered for a while if Finn wasn't part of the Jedi Order, like Luke's Jedi group, because there's nobody that would really be able to say he wasn't other than Kylo at this point. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. I was really hoping to see that and find out he would be like the next Force-sensitive person that was like the other hope, like, you know, where Leia was the possibility. There is another, if Luke didn't work out, like I would have liked to find out Finn was that person, but he really hasn't been given much focus or attention. Alright, so back to this Episode 8 situation. After the Kylo Rey thing, somehow, yeah, not only does like he immediately want her to turn bad, which if he was smart, he could have played with it, but then like, I don't know, it would have been, I guess the First Order wouldn't have known what to do with itself. But he wants her to go bad, and then they have instant division all over again, and somehow she left that ship and reunites with Chewbacca and the Falcon. I'm gonna guess maybe she got back in the coffin ship and they met up with her somewhere in space, but I don't remember. And I don't know, they may have skipped it. Then you get to the Salt Planet, and I'm sorry, I forgot the Admiral, what's her name, played by Laura Dern. And oh yeah, this leads me to the feminism topic, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but I think I'm being fair in this. I think they did a good job, but then they overdid it. When I say they did a good job, well, first of all, this all goes back to Episode 7 with Rey. When I first heard that the lead would be a female, I was like, alright, female Force sensitive, that's cool. Finally, we'll get to see in the movies what they did in the cartoons with like Ahsoka and Asajj Ventress. Those two female characters are much cooler in my opinion. Of course, they've also been developed over several years in the cartoons, but there's much more to them. They aren't these Mary Sue Rey characters that can do anything without ever having tried to do it. They grow over time. Asajj Ventress is amazing. If you don't know anything about her, watch the Clone Wars. What she develops into is just so much fun. But anyway, so yeah, we've got this. All right, so the feminism thing first starts to emerge when you pick up on the fact that Leia's fleet seems overwhelmingly run by women. And this in itself is not a problem. It makes sense. It's like, alright, Leia's surrounding herself by people she knows and trusts, and it happens to be that she gets along with women. Fine. But then you compare that the First Order is almost all white men. I've heard there's Asians walking around in there, and I can't remember. Which that also makes me thrown off with like Finn infiltrating. Like, the only reason I'd actually watch this movie again is to see if there's any African or dark-skinned people walking around the First Order as officers, because I kind of felt like there was not a single one, and no one questions him walking around as an officer. But anyway, I don't know why all of the First Order has to be white men. But anyway, and somehow Rose is walking around as an Asian woman, and that's not an issue, but people have said there's Asians on that deck. I don't remember. But the Resistance, yeah, there was like one guy walking around and a whole bunch of women. That's okay, because I was sitting there and I was like, wow, so this, I see what they're doing here. Now I know what it was like to be a young woman, or a woman of any age really, but especially a little girl, sitting in the like late 70s or early 80s in the original trilogy, seeing like the command centers being run by all men, Princess Leia, and maybe one other woman in the background answering calls. I was kind of impressed with that. I was like, because I understood. I was like, wow, this is such a weird change up, but I can still roll with it. The problems come, like, that would have been great. The message is clear. I like it. Although I do have problems with the First Order being all men. That was like a little bit of overkill there. But then, where it gets to be a problem, and it's a problem that Rey seems to be better than Luke. Sure, he's closed off to the Force, but I don't know. There should have been a little more respect there. Even that's kind of okay because she's the hero now. the problem is with Poe and this Admiral. Laura, I'm just going to call her Laura Dern. The first problem right off the bat is that this resistance is made up of like 220 people at this point or something, and she's a high-ranking admiral, but somehow he does not know that she's a woman. Like, it's like, come on, who are you kidding? But they've got to make this scene where she has to throw in his face, like, what, did you think you assumed I was a man? I mean, alright, right off the bat, you're letting us know what's going on here, that she's going to make him look like an idiot, but it happens over and over and over again. And so somehow he doesn't know this famous admiral is a woman, and if anything, he should be seeing what we're all seeing, which is that this place is run by women, so it should not be a shock. But this serves to make Poe look like an idiot. And then it leads to, like, based on how he's already ignored Princess Leia and gotten people killed, he's going against orders. He gets busted down in command, which makes sense. But suddenly he's this idiot character that doesn't listen to anybody else, even though I got the impression in Episode 7 that he was always very loyal and respectful to command, but who knows. Because he really wasn't in it that much. Then he decides Laura Dern's character is borderline mutinous, with her decisions being so irrational, and it'll get people killed worse than the things he did, that he's going to lead a mutiny. Now, this is one of these moments, these roller coaster moments throughout the movie. I was like, this movie can still be saved. And this was like, oh my god, they're going to actually make the woman into an idiot or a bad guy, and Poe's going to be he's going to save the day and be the hero. I was like, oh my god, they did give us guys something. Alright, cool. But then we find out she had this secret plan and didn't tell him because I guess, I mean, she was the boss. The boss doesn't have to tell a subordinate things like that. I mean, that may be how it goes in like your everyday work environment, but these are lives on the line. They're getting chased. There's not like a fear that Poe's going to go and tell the bad guys, is there? But instead she creates this situation where he feels the need to commit a mutiny, which I don't know if people got killed or just stunned over. But I mean, sure, it was bad writing that she would choose to keep this a secret, but it also makes Poe look bad because it made him look like a 5-year-old having a hissy fit. Then they stun him like a dog, and Leia makes some comment about, I like him. It's like, yeah, he commits mutiny, but I like him, so we're going to keep him around. Mutiny is not a small thing. This is a big deal. You get executed over it. But the whole point of this is just to give Poe something to do while Rey's off. All this stuff's going on just so that it can set up Luke at the Salt Planet and Rey and all that. But anyway, gosh, where was I going with that? It got really offensive, and with that aspect to the Laura Dern character was just stepping on Poe. It was ridiculous. Then they kill her off in a way that, like many have said, like, now that you've make the hyperspace a weapon, why aren't all the ships being jumped into the ships? Why those ships that ran out of fuel and got killed, why didn't they say, hey, look, we're going to jump into this ship? But for some reason, Laura Dern's character decides to do it. Others have pointed out she could have used autopilot. This is also one of those things where I kind of feel like maybe Admiral Ackbar was going to go out like this. Like he was there. He dies off screen in the explosion that has the Mary Poppins Leia scene, which I'll try to get to and I forgot about. It makes me wonder if originally Ackbar was going to be that character. And they said, what would be better is let's put a woman in that spot that we've never met. That's another thing with the Laura Dern character. It's not that she's a woman that bothers me. Although, yeah, it bothers me how she talks to Poe. I mean, she comes in there judging him more than he judged her. What bothers me, in Lore Sateca from Episode 7 is the same situation, is you've got this rich Star Wars history, and you bring in these brand new characters and act like to the audience that they mean something. And it's like, I don't know who this person is. I can't just care about them because you're like, hey, take my word for it, she's awesome or he's awesome. It's like, no, if you wanted that Lore Sateca guy that Kylo Ren kills off, to matter. It should have been like Wedge Antilles or something, because I would have been like, the whole time I'm sitting there like, man, this lore, is this guy lore important? Did I forget about him somehow? But he's nobody. And now Snoke, I'm supposed to believe he's important, and they kill him off like nothing. And it's like, so I don't even have to care about him if he ever comes up in any kind of book or story again. And then, yeah, like whoever, Admiral Toto or whatever her name was, it was like, I don't care, I don't know who she is, but if it had been Admiral Akbar, that would have been cool. She could have been the random person blown up on the bridge that no one knew about or cared, like, I don't know. And I think, like I said, I don't know if somebody intended for it to be different. They said, no, we're going to break from tradition and we're going to have brand new characters. But that's, I don't know, that just was annoying. So then we get to the Salt Planet, and we've already getting it beat over our head over and over about how limited in resources the Resistance is. They unearth these shaky looking, they look like B-Wings. They're called ski speeders instead of snow speeders, but they're on the salt, so they're not in the snow anyway. These things are so bad. They're shaking and look like they're falling apart at times. I think they say there's 13 or 14 of them, and they're up against these huge Imperial walkers that look like they're all roided out because, you know, they're the upgraded versions. And I'm not supposed to think that these things wouldn't get taken out within 2 minutes, but somehow, like, you know, anyone that matters doesn't get killed. And I don't even know, like, you know, like, if they had a way to stop the walkers, whereas the snow speeders came up with their tow cables. But really, that battle was just worthless. It was just a way to put out some toys. And that reminds me, at the end of this, I'm going to talk about toys and their ability to sell based on this movie. And then you get the scene where Luke shows up as the Force Ghost and gets killed, or he dies by basically, I don't know, the people were like, did he have a heart attack? That's what killed him. I personally didn't like the Force Ghost idea. I wasn't surprised at all. After seeing how Han went out, I knew that Luke would go. I knew Luke should go out in a nice, cool lightsaber fight. I knew that most likely it would not be how it went. And I am not surprised at all that he was not really there, because that's exactly what, you know, oh, he didn't really fight. It's pretty impressive. It's just lame that he went out like that. I think, like, a lot of people say, oh, he had this heart attack. It's like, no, I don't think he did. I think that basically when Kylo lit into his ghost, he really killed Luke there. It was like a symbolic thing, and it traveled all the way back. Similar to like how Kylo and Rey could, like, touch each other, or the water would, and from her planet would hit him where he was in his ship. I think it was, I mean, even though he just hit an image, it actually did kill Luke, and then he became one with the Force. And I'm sure his ghost will be haunting Kylo in the next movie. I mean, it's just not what I wanted to see. I mean, that could have been how he went out, but I would much more have rather seen him get a nice, cool lightsaber fight somewhere in there. But compared to a lot of the movie, that's small potatoes for me. I think it's really cool with this movie, watching all the rants, seeing all the appreciation for Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker. A lot of people in my lifetime have complained about how Luke whines, but these rants show that he is very important to very many people, and I agree. So, I don't know, I just wanted to mention that. And now I'm going to talk about the toys that I mentioned. I don't know how the toy sales are doing, but I cannot imagine they're doing well. I mean, after you see this movie, what's there to want to, if you're a little kid, what's there to want to play or reenact? And if you're an adult that collects toys like obviously you can see I do, what scene is there to recreate? The vehicles, it's like Poe's X-Wing from the very beginning, but he doesn't even fight TIE fighters, I don't think. I can't remember. I think he's just against turbo lasers. And then you can't really recreate the lame, slow space chase. Who wants to recreate the casino, free the animals scene? You could recreate Luke and Rey on the island, but I don't recall wanting to do the Luke and Yoda scene as a kid on Dagobah. The Salt Planet, if you get the walkers, you're going to have them go up against these junky ski speeders. Who cares? And I think that's everything. And oh, well, yeah, there's the Royal Guard fight with Snoke. That is the only scene in there I can see wanting to replicate. But me personally, I don't care. I know I've saved a lot of money because after I did buy some of the stuff over here, Phasma and Ren, before Episode 7 came out, because I was like, how could it not be cool? But this time around, I said, whoa, let's wait till the movie comes out before we buy anything. I actually did that with Rogue One, and as you can see, I did buy their figures. They became very cheap, but I love those characters. They're real characters to me. That movie was fantastic. But I don't see me wanting to buy these Episode 8 figures, not only on principle, but like this, there's nothing to this movie. Even if they were $5, like I don't think I need Luke in white Jedi robes and Rey who's repainted in gray. Like, this movie did nothing for me except anger me. Then you got the vehicles. Like, what kid's gonna want to buy these vehicles? They're either things from Episode 7 or things that were pieces of junk, and they're not gonna make the big capital ships. That's another thing I meant to mention in the space chase scene. Alright, the First Order's got better ships in all regards, and all resources, but somehow Leia's ship can outrun them at like maximum sub-light speed. It's like, fine. Oh, wow. So she's got something. The rebels have one thing going for them, and it's this thing the writers happen to need to make this scene work. Give me a break. Oh, anyway, I think that's pretty much it. I apologize if I'm all over the place the first time doing it. Believe it or not, I even outlined mostly what I was going to talk about. I will say that the Han Solo movie's coming. I've already heard that at least one director left, and then they got Ron Howard. I've heard other criticisms, and I can tell you, at the very least, as a message to Disney, I am not paying for a movie ticket to see this movie. Sadly, Disney will be getting my movie for the Marvel movies because, I mean, I've got to go see them. But I am refusing to see this Star Wars until they get their act together. Rogue One was what you should do, not this other stuff. Do not bring in these political messages. I mean, you can do the whole women are great thing. That's as long as you don't overdo it and say that men are bad. That's where you go. That's where you go wrong. Don't promote one by pushing the other one down at the same time. Both can be great. You can have heroes on both sides and villains on both sides. I am not, at this point, definitely not seeing Episode 9 in theater, because I saw Episode 7 twice. Once, to see it because I was hoping it would be good and I like Abrams. And then I saw it a second time just to let it sink in. And I even bought it eventually on Vudu just to figure it out. But ultimately, I did not like that movie. But at least, like, there are very few things in it I can look at and say that shouldn't happen. Whereas the space chase in this movie just killed it all for me in one hit. But yeah, I'm not gonna. Oh, and I saw Episode 8 once, and then people were like, "Hey, you want to go see it again?" No, I'm good. I'm good. I have the only reason I'm gonna see this again is when it's rentable, and I'll probably get it from like the library or something where I don't have to pay money. I just want to see how bad it was, or maybe I was tired and didn't notice things, and it's actually okay. But this movie was god awful. I mean, it's just, it didn't make sense. It was trashy. It was, oh my god. A lot of people bash the prequels, but those prequels, even Episode 1, and everybody's saying Episode 2 was the worst one. Episode 1's the worst one. But those movies were so much better. First of all, I don't understand why people hate Episode 2. Sure, the romance stuff's a little rough, and Hayden Christensen is a little rough. It's not his fault. It's the lines he was given. But just the stuff with the Jedi and the clones makes up for that movie. It's an awesome movie. But yeah, this basically had Kylo Ren and Snoke and Rey's scene and nothing else going on. And don't tell me that scene made it for a good movie. Even that could have been better. Anyway, thanks for watching. I know I ramble, but this is my way to send out my story to people without having to retell it over and over. Let me know what you thought. Subscribe if you actually like this kind of stuff. And you know, if you were like, hey man, what did you think of this other movie? Maybe I'll go watch it again. Chances are I've seen it. If you're watching this, you probably like similar things. I'll tell you what I thought. I don't know. It's an experiment. See ya.